My name is Michaelsen, and I work at Sandvika High School, which is in Oslo, a suburban of Oslo, Norway. And I'm going to show you a little about what I've done and how I've been working. I have been at my school since 2006, and it was a brand new school in 2006. It's not that brand new anymore, but we like to think about ourselves as the pioneers when it comes to use of technology at our school. And in Norway now, of course, we're going to talk about the lockdown. I heard on the news that lockdown is the key word this year, and that's suitable because that's how every country is experiencing things right now. So I'm going to talk a little about that as well, and we're going to talk about learning online and using technology to learn. So my topic today is the digital classroom and the future of education and using technology to boost the quality of teaching and learning. Because it has to be about the learning of the students mostly, and it's not that much about the technology, but the technology will help us reach our students and hopefully make them learn more and be more engaged in their own learning, which is very important right now. I'm going to talk a little about my adventures so far. I started at my school in 2006. I'm a little older than that, so I already had time working both in the administration in the county for a couple of years and then at another vocational school in our district. So I have been in school for ages. In 2013, a colleague of mine asked me if I wanted to help her write a book, and I said yes, but that venture did not turn out to be anything. So I was thinking when I was walking around in my class with my 16-year-old students that perhaps I could write a book with my students instead of with a colleague. And I asked the students if they were interested in doing that because we were working with technology and we were doing a lot of research, trying out different ways to learn. And of course, when you come up with an idea, all you need is one person to say yes, and then you have a go. So we started writing about the connected learners and how to learn using technology. So here's my class, and you can see that they are seated in groups, and nearest to the picture is through the camera is the chapter 1 group. So we divided the book in different chapters. We had chapter editors, and everyone was working on different topics that they wanted to, that they thought were engaging when it came to working with technology in the classroom. I might ask you to think what you think would be the most interesting topic for students at 16 to write about in the book. And you might be surprised by the answer because what they were most engaged in was the chapter about motivation. So I think there were like 3-4 of the students who wanted to write about motivation in school. And most of them reflected on that no teacher actually asked them about that. They were just kind of taking it for granted that they were motivated by the sticks and carrots, good grades if they worked hard and bad grades if they didn't. And then that was all that motivated them. But they were motivated by being able to set the agenda themselves and find topics that they were interested in. And the book is on sale at Amazon still, actually. And we did not get very rich. We had hopes, but we did get international recognition, that was for sure. The year after we wrote the book, I presented at BET in London. Some of you might have been there and certainly know about it. And me and 2 of my students were holding a conference or a workshop there, or no, more like a presentation. And the BBC attended our session, which was kind of funny because they didn't attend many other sessions, I think. But anyway, they wrote about it on their webpage. And later they came and visited us and made a program about the use of technology in Norway. And that led to me being able to write a book with one of the largest publishers in Norway. And that book actually sold so many copies that I was able to make a second edition. So the digital classroom is certainly here to stay. In 2013 and 15, I think I was a little before my age, which is kind of sad. I thought so anyway, but after a couple of years, it picked up, and people are now using it in teachers training. The way I work with technology is that I have my own blog, and it's called The Connected Teaching and Learning. And the web page is just my name, and Michaelsen. It's easy to find. And I try to share lesson plans and things that I'm engaged in when it comes to learning. So the latest article I posted is, does 2020 present a crucible moment for K-12 education? And I'm going to talk a little about that. Are those events that we have had now, are they going to be crucible for the education? Is education going to be disrupted? Everyone's talking about disruptive. And then in education, what would that be? Why would we change the way we work? What would make us change the way we work? And as in the introduction, I'm working 20% for the University of Oslo. Here is the picture of the people I'm working with. And our job in school is to tie the practitioner with the research, to tie in what is actually done in school and the research behind it. So I'm very engaged in the research and why we do the different things that we do, so that we don't just choose a tool or a software product out of random or just because it was there, but that we have a plan in what we do and why we do it. That's very important. So it's very interesting to work with the University of Oslo. So my latest project then was that I thought that I might translate my Norwegian book from the Cappelen Damm, the largest publisher in Norway, and I asked them if it was okay that I translated it, and then if I owned the ownership, the rights to that English book, and then they said yes. So I pitched the idea to Routledge and the Taylor and Francis group, and it's now going to be published next month. So that's very exciting for me. And here are the different topics that we write about. And here are the table of contents. And I'm especially happy about the chapter 10, written by a professor at the University of Oslo, that ties in what I do in the classroom with research and why you should work this way. And I'm also happy that I have some good reviews from people in the field of education. So, how did we start working with technology at Sandvika, and what are the criteria and success stories behind what we do? And I think that we were very lucky to stumble upon block scheduling very quickly when we started up, because block scheduling is very good to use with technology, and it's also very good to use when you want to have content creators and student voice. And content creators and student voice is something that I emphasize in my teaching and learning, because I think that you need to put the voice to the students, and they need to own the learning, and they need to have the engagement, and they need the agency. They need to want to learn, because that's when good learning happens. And there we go. So we had a visitor from the UNESCO, and she wrote about our school and the success criteria for Sandvika, and she put block scheduling pretty high up on that list. And also that the teachers are highly motivated and creative, and that we have a very encouraging, inclusive, and holistic learning environment. And the school leaders are doing a good job, commendable job, by taking risks to implement new ideas. And that the level of flexibility and freedom seen among the teachers are inspiring, and the students, because you need to let go of controlling what goes on in the classroom, and you need to trust your teachers, and the teachers need to trust their students that they're on the right track. I think that's a very important point in this way of learning. In the picture on top right, you can see my students. They're working in groups of 4. I also write about cooperative learning in the book, and when you work with cooperative learning, you have the students seated 2 and 2 in groups, and then when you want groups of 4, they just turn around and then they form groups of 4. And working together in groups like that is very, very important when you use technology. You don't want your students behind computer the whole day alone, wandering off most likely to places they're not supposed to, but have them on task in a group of 4 and use cooperative learning strategies to have them monitor what they're doing and have one leader looking at for time, and that everyone gets to contribute equally. That's also very important, I think. So here we are Skyping with some students in Israel and India about climate change, and they also made a presentation from Norway's point of view on how they looked on climate change. This was at the beginning of Greta Thunberg's work, so it was kind of in the beginning of it, so it was interesting for them to work on that. And this is reflection by a student in my class on how it was to talk with people from Israel and from India. And although the Israel students were only 12, the teacher was very eager to give us some opinions as well. So we got a lot of information from there, even though the students were younger than my students. And then they wrote on their blogs. And to write on the blog is also a very good way to use technology in class. Like I use my blog to write articles, my students use their blogs to write articles. And as a teacher, I would then share my students' blogs on the right side of my on my blog. This year I don't have any students, unfortunately, so you can't go in and see what students are writing, but I'm very certain that students who write blogs write more, write better quality, do more research, look for sources, and name their sources, because they know that they are not only writing for themselves and one teacher, but they have a wide audience outside. And I use my personal learning network to connect my students with other students in other places in the world, because I know teachers around the world from conferences, but also from social media like Twitter, and also Skype in education has very many places to meet other educators and make projects with them. And it's very exciting for students to be able to talk with students in other countries. And there are a whole range of subjects where that actually fits in, where you talk about different religions, if you want to go there, different culture, language, history, a lot of areas where you can cooperate online. So I just want to say a little about block scheduling. This is a timetable from a couple of years ago. We now have a new administrative program, but this one had kind of a good color code so you could see the different subjects. So on Monday, only English. On Tuesday, some physical education and science. On Wednesday, only math. On Thursday, geography and social studies. And the same teacher has both subjects, so he can choose if he wants to do one of them one day and the other one the other day. And then Friday, only Norwegian. And then they have second language on the beginning of Friday and the beginning of Monday. Depends on if they have that on the same day or not. But block scheduling makes it easy for the students to go in depth in different subjects. And deeper learning, of course, is a thing that is going around in many countries now. People want to be working with, go deeper into the material. So deeper learning is something that many countries are putting in their curriculum right now. And so in Norway as well. So how do we address the issues of remote learning when Europe and the rest of the world is going into lockdown? That's one of the questions I got from the presenters, organizers here in my presentation. And it's interesting because that's what I've been doing the whole day today. Because in Oslo and in my county, the numbers are going up, and we are now in this red state alert. We are now not able to have all our students back in school. We have had that until now. So today I've been working on a new schedule for all the first year students, and we are going to have just half of the group first, and then they go home, and then the rest of the half afterwards. And it takes a lot of organizing, I can tell you that. We have to wonder if that is half the learning or not, and what is best. Is it when they are at home all the time in front of the computer on Teams, or is it when they're at school half the time to meet their teacher and their classmates? So you could say that online learning remains front and center in building a comprehensive education solution for the years ahead and beyond. I'm certain that some things are going to change after we have been forced to work this way for such a long time. There are some takeaways, but there are also certain things that are going to go back to the way they were before this happened. Today is also the good news day about the vaccine, so probably we see some end to this in the near future. I am not sure. These are the numbers that I wrote about on my webpage in March, and you can see how the graph goes up and up and up and up with the 1.38 billion students at home. And even though the remote learning is proving successful in some areas, uncertainty regarding the duration of the crisis is complicating the situation, and prolonged school closures can have adverse consequences, such as children youth being deprived of opportunities for growth and development. And everyone, of course, wants the students to be at school and not at home. So important areas to focus on when we talk about learning online. Student voice and choice, I used to call it. I call it student voice here, but student voice and student choice, that's two very, very, very important facts. And this is not new. Teaching has shifted from teacher-led teaching and assessment methods to a learning situation where the students, with the teacher as a supervisor, take more active responsibility for his or her own progress. And that is the key in working the way we do now with technology, because you kind of open this highway with all these lanes, and you set your students free, and you say, go learn and be interested, find interesting subjects. You can't just have a textbook with questions and correct answers, because that's not going to go well with technology and online learning. And then we have the blended learning, combining the best from both worlds. And that's what we've been doing in my school yesterday and today, because we were offered some software now where they have videos, online explanatory videos for very many subjects. And my hope is now that we have half the time that our students can be at school, that the other half of that time is spent online, studying these videos, looking at them, learning with them, and then coming to school and asking the questions they have to their teachers and their peers. And that blended learning is the best way to do that. And I'm going to talk a little about blended learning afterwards. And then we have the block scheduling, and then we have the teacher training. And I think you've been talking about that earlier today, that teacher training is key. And that's also finding from my book and my researcher, that she's interviewed a lot of teachers and also new teachers. And most of them say they lack the training of use of technology in learning. And everyone assumes that the young people who come, the young teachers, are set on technology and can master that more than the old teachers like me. But that's not true, because I haven't learned use of technology in context with learning. And you can't just learn something out of context. And that's the same with students. You can't teach them how to behave online, for instance, out of context, because then they can't see the relations to how they're supposed to behave. And then, so I'm kind of into the choosing the right pedagogy. And it's not about the tools, it's about the learning. So you should never say, okay, which tool should I use today? Of course, itslearning is it's a given here, since it's a learning conference. But that's kind of the learning management system. It's not the tool for the learning there and then. You have to decide what you want your students to know. How does it look like when they know it? And then you decide on if you're going to use a planner or whatever you're going to use in itslearning. And I'm going to come back to peer assessment, which I like a lot. So Pasi Salberg from Finland has 4 points that need to be in place in order to change education to the better. And it's less classroom-based teaching, it's more personalized learning, it's focused on social skills, empathy, and leadership. And it's the purpose of schooling is to find your talents. And all these 4 combined will give you a better education and will give us place for students to learn more and want to learn more. And Michaelsen says in his book that if schools don't change, then students, and they are continue to be boring, he says, in the way that the instructions are just given tasks from the teacher, that the students have to answer questions that the teacher knows the answer to. It has to be that the students ask the questions that nobody knows the answers to, and then they find the answers. It has to be that way. Otherwise, students are going to do something else and find other ways to educate themselves if schools lag behind in that area. So these are very important things to look at. So this is the changed role of the teacher and the students. The teaching has shifted from teacher-led teaching and assessment methods to a learning situation where the student, with the teacher as a supervisor, takes more active responsibility for his progress, and where the assessment will help develop the student's ability to assess their own work and reflect on it. So this is Black and William and also Hattie. So I think that's so important that teachers work on the students' ability to assess their own work and reflect on it, because if you get that, then you really have found the silver bullet, actually, because I see that teachers run after their students to get something to assess, and the students should be able to know how their work is and where they are in their goal and how the goal looks like when it's done. So then and only then can they take control of their own learning, and that is so essential today that they do. So student-centered learning looks like a high degree of student engagement, challenge, enthusiasm, and joy, and students know what they're learning and why. And a blend of individual, collaborative, team, and large group work. And that students use personalized technology to produce as well as consume, and that they have some opportunity to work at their own pace and explore their own interests. And that they're doing the bulk of the work and the talking, because studies show that the teacher is doing the bulk of the work and the talking. And if you measure a class, a typical class, the teacher will talk like this, and then students might be able to answer some questions, and then the teacher will talk like this, and then wrap up. And it needs to be the other way around. That has to be in, especially now that there are lockdowns and students perhaps are at home. They can't sit at home in front of a computer and listen to the teacher all day. They have to work on their own as well. So this is the OECD, and he says, Andreas Schließer, I said that wrong, the Germans will have to laugh about that, but I like him a lot because he says a lot of interesting things, and what he said now in relation to the lockdown is that it's a great moment for learning. All the red tape that keeps things away is gone, and people are looking for solutions that in the past they did not want to see, and that is so true, because actually when I pitched in for the book that I'm writing in English now, a lot of people who looked at it said, well, you know, this is smart, but I don't think teachers want to work like this. And then whoosh, everyone was working like that. So things changed. And they will personalize their learning even if the system around them won't. That's what he believes. And he believes that the genie cannot be put back in the bottle. So educators around the world will have to prove him right, because I think some are looking forward to putting the genie back in the bottle, to be honest. But I hope that's not going to happen. And so the game changer in education has already happened. Forbes says much of the same as OECD says. that working from home kind of changed the way we do things, like this conference here, which would have been, I'm sure, in some fashionable, nice place if things were allowed to be like that. So it says here, strengthen distance learning. Educators are hungry for opportunities to collaborate with and learn from their peers, and how to deliver engaging learning experience and build new approaches to pedagogy. So learning from their peers is also a key word here, like teacher training, but also learning from the peers to use each other to pitch in and help each other. That's very, very, very important in this new world of teaching with technology and also distance learning. So also I read this article by Christensen, who wrote Disruptive Innovation, I think the book is called. And it's very critical to know and understand that the forces at work only create a potential crucible moment. They only create a potential crucible moment. They don't create a crucible moment. So external circumstances are certainly forcing schools to adapt right now, but whether these short-term adaptations convert into long-lasting changes that benefit students has more to do with the chemistry between schools' external circumstances and their existing ways of doing business. So it's the barriers that stem from processes that are deeply embedded in how schools operate. So like scheduling, as I was talking about, staffing, curriculum development, discipline policies, and instructional models. All these processes are barriers to change. So if schools don't change those and go back as they were, they might lose the momentum they had actually. And that is something that we need to think about as school leaders, at least, and also as teachers. To make a lasting change, we need to think about what we would like to preserve and why and how. So everyone who's worked in school know that every time a new reform comes, some teachers just sit there and think, it's going to pass, I'm just going to work as I do. And they will always say, I've done this, I've always done it like this, so I'm not going to be very concerned about these changes. But the changes when you put technology and computers into classroom are very extensive. And if you don't do anything about that, but just keep on working at the same way that you always have, then you're going to experience less learning, less teaching in your classroom. And there's been a lot of research on just giving computers to teachers and then they just go on with the same kind of teaching. They hold a presentation in front of the class students are supposed to take some notes, and then they get some assignments. And what happens is that the teacher is standing in front of the classroom holding a presentation, and the students are watching TV or newspapers or talking to each other. And then the tasks that they get afterwards are so textbook tasks. There are answers that are right and answers that are wrong that the students get it anyway. And they don't have to use much energy to do that. And then nothing happens or less happens. I mean, in that instant, I think technology should just be taken away because it's not doing any good at all. And if teachers keep holding presentations without talking to the students about, are you supposed to take notes now? Do you learn more when you take notes? There are some discussions about taking notes with pen and paper. Do you use your keyboard? Do you get everything that's said if you do that? Do you stop your presentation and ask the students, what was the most important thing here? Talk with your peers, discuss it, write it down, because you have to really plan when you teach using technology. It's not something that you just do, you have to really plan it. And so here are the one I talked about, and then we need to talk to the teachers and the students about this and how we want to change the way we learn. And I say the quote here that we define learning as a transformative process of taking in information that, when internalized and mixed with what we have experienced, changes what we know and builds on what we do. It's based on input, process, and reflection. It is what changes us. So learning, that has to be there before learning can take place. We have to take something new and we mix it with something we know, and we have to work with it. It has to be active learning. It's not just reading in a book and answering questions. And this is where technology can help us. So the research has to be behind our choices when we teach in class and what we use the digital tools and how we use them. And I say that with the use of technology in the classroom and use of digital tools, you might hear some people say that the teacher's role isn't that important. He's more like a side person who helps a little. But I would like to argue that the teacher is more important now than ever before, because it's so easy to get lost in the road of digital tools. And it's so easy not to know where to get the good information and how to process everything online. And I think that's where the teacher comes in to help the students and not to navigate in this very blurred, difficult environment. So when students are at home now, so how do we, for instance, assess students when they're home? Because we don't know, we can't monitor everything they do then. And but we can discuss academic achievements with students using Teams or Zoom, alone or in groups. We can collect products from students in different formats: video, podcasts, websites, presentation, written text. And we may ask students to document their process through photo, video, audio, or written reports. And we may ask students to improve, evaluate, comment on, or reflect on previously submitted works. I think a good idea, if you're wondering if your students are getting help or if they're just, when they have a presentation online in Teams, or if they're just reading a manuscript, I think you pretty much most teachers can see if they're very involved in their project or if they're just reading it. And I know a lot of teachers who do, they have them make like portfolios where they document the process until the end product. And that way you know that it's authentic what they've done, and then they know the material instead of just giving the end product. I think that is very smart in this online environment way of working. So how do we enhance student learning in this environment? And as I said, I'm very, I like the research behind the peer assessment. And this is a research paper from the University of Oxford with the, you can see you can go in there and click and read about the research there. And I try to tie this in with peer assessment in itslearning. And I always used to, I'm sure you can see here on my, here I use peer assessment for every student gets 3 different papers to assess. And then they grade them, and then they have the standards there. You can see 2 standards that they have to reflect on. And before you do this task, you talk to your students and you show them how it looks like when you have high, perform high, and then the medium and low. It's where we say it in Norway. Or proficiency and beginning and emerging. You can do that however you want to. It's probably better to do that than have these numbers or letter grades, because that doesn't really mean anything. Because you have to assess by saying, this was good, you could do more here, you could do less here, this is the way you should be. So if you start off, for instance, a blog post or an essay or an assignment by the students delivering it in here and then getting peer assessments from 3 different students back, and then they do the assignment and then they give it into the teacher. That's a good way to learn. And then I want to talk about blended learning at the end here. Because blended learning is what we're doing now. And blended learning is watching videos online, doing some tasks online, working with students, and then coming to school and then kind of tying it up all together with the teacher and the students there in groups. So for instance, a lot of universities are doing that instead of the lectures in the lecture halls, and the lectures are at home, and then the students come to school and they talk about what they heard and their notes and what they learned and most importantly though, the questions they have. And you can do this in lower grades as well. And I know teachers who do that with math in 5th grades, 7th grades, and they watch the video, they do the tasks, and then they have to write down questions they have. And then the teacher addresses those questions, and then they can see if they understood it or not. And of course, I'm amazed that not more people use this, because everyone knows that if you do a math problem, then most students might get it, many students might not. Some students need to hear it a couple more times. So if you have all these things on the video that the students can see anytime and as many times as they want to and when they want to, then you're really helping your students with their learning. And blended learning is, of course, based on research, that we always connect new information to something we know, for better and worse. So if you saw the video and then you come to school and the teacher talks about the subject, then it's something you know, and you can attach emotions to the information. Everyone has his or fully individual view of what he or she is taught. And there are other important differences between individuals that make the learning process and outcome different from person to person. So blended learning kind of ties two very good ways of learning together, that you can do something on your own with help, and then you come back to school in class and you get help from the teacher and the students. And blended learning offers more structured learning. All the material can be available online for students when they're absent or anytime they want it. So just using these kinds, like the blended learning and the peer assessment, those two together, I think will really help your students, any student, in their learning, and give the teacher feedback on the different material. If the students know it, if it was too difficult, what are the questions they have. Sometimes they might have questions that a learning partner can help them with, and sometimes many have the same questions, so that means that the teacher needs to address that again. And this is from the student's point of view: learning where and when they want, making learning more relevant to the students, improve time efficiency, learning at the pace that suits the individual students, easy ways of collaborating, more ownership of the learning process. So I want to wrap it up now. Back to start. What are the takeaways? These are my main points of enhancing the quality of learning online. Student voice and student choice. Make the tasks interesting. It doesn't matter how much fancy technology you have if the tasks are not that interesting or relevant for the students. Use blended learning when you're online, because it's so easy and it's so accessible, and it's so important to the students that they are able to review something when they're home. If they're really interested, they will do that. And then challenging the barriers, as I talked about. Nothing's going to change if you don't change the barriers for the students, the teachers, the schools. And I just mentioned block scheduling and teacher training there. And then, of course, peer assessment, which I love. I think itslearning has a very good tool for that. And then I want to remind you that it's not about the tools, but about the learning. It's about the students and how they learn, and it's about the conversations you need to have with your students all the time, if this sounds sensible to them or not.